So what makes a high-performing leadership team? So I've previously referred to leadership structures, and I made the point in that a leadership team provides a diversity of views and a collaboration and ensuring that the right areas of the organisation are being heard at the right levels. And so a leadership team is often, key leaders within the organisation, which makes a lot of sense there. And they're usually and often heads of departments, and if not all the main departments, definitely the ones that have the biggest impact within a business. And they usually are brought together to provide input into the way the organisation is moving, and usually it needs to represent those areas to the leadership team, and often up to the board in some cases, depending on the structure of how that leadership structure works within that organisation. So what makes a good leadership team, apart from ensuring that that we have a lot of the organisation itself represented, but what makes a good one is that it has high impact within the organisation and is highly effective. So it needs to have a positive impact, and positive being the key word here, positive impact on all the stakeholders that the business is impacting itself. So that's external ones, and because ultimately, the team needs to understand who they're in service to, and this is a key point here: who is that team in service to? So, an understanding that there could be multiple, should we say, masters that team may be in service to. So if it is a leadership team of a large organisation, it may be in service to the board, it may be in service to the shareholders, it may be in service to some key stakeholders that maybe there's a collaboration between another business, as well as, and of course, the employees within that business. And I haven't even mentioned the clients as yet. So ultimately, they're in service to all those different masters. So how do they ensure they have high impact and are highly effective is ensuring that you then have that high-performing leadership team. So for them to be able to be highly impactful, they need to be able to have those genuine conversations, which I've talked about previously. And those genuine conversations is where there is a high level of trust, there is a low level of fear of conflict, because ultimately that we need to actually have those genuine conversations, which often can look very like conflict itself. They're committed. If they're not committed, they wouldn't be leaning into that team and actually prepared to have that conflict or those genuine conversations, and also prepared to hold each other accountable and prepared to be attentive to the results that the team is. And therefore, if it's the leadership team, it's the team that is responsible for the organisation, the results of that organisation. So you might have noticed I've listed out the 5 dysfunctions of a team as I talk through that, and that is often a good place to start to identify how can we ensure that the team is high performing, is to ensure that those areas are in there. So once that's in place, then you can start to actually ensure that you are then working as a leadership team that is focused on delivering for that business and looking at the results that the business needs to be able to achieve. So one thing to do is to ensure that team, that leadership team, is focusing outside in. What I mean by that is that they're looking at the stakeholders that they are in service to first, and worrying about them and their growth, how they are moving forward, and ensuring that they have what they need and the support that they need to be able to continue to grow, either as teams, as individuals, and so that they're performing at the level that they need them to. But they're also focusing on themselves, i.e. in, as an outside that they are then focusing on those spaces. So it is purely in, you could say there should be a fair bit of what people might think of as servant leadership. How can we support and ensure that those areas that they're in service to are being led in a way that allows them to develop? The other key point is to look at future back. So they should be looking as far forward, as far in the future as they can, without losing sight of the here and now. But that's what future back is. So also is looking as far forward as you can, and then planning backwards from there, and identifying everything from the risks, etc., and the relationships that are needed to be developed and maintained. So a high performing leadership team needs to perform within itself and needs to focus on itself at times, but ultimately it should be accountable to itself on the results that it is driving. And for it to be able to do that, it needs to be a real team, and a team that has a clear purpose for itself. Who are they in service to, and what are we trying to deliver? So ultimately, it is trying to build that shared commitment and ensure that those genuine conversations are having and holding each other to account, but being aware that they're in service to people and groups of people that are outside from that team. And that's probably the easiest way to summarize a high-performing leadership team. I will say that there's usually more than one leadership teams within an organization. There's often at least two, usually a management team and a leadership team, but often there's also a board or leadership teams for large departments. So you could have, on a very large organization, you could have a dozen or more leadership teams there, and how they interact with each other then becomes another key element. And so how they interact, so they could be of service to a leadership team above them as such, and employees below. But then as well, they need to be ensuring that they're able to interact with the other departments that are either supporting them or they're supporting the other team, and ensuring that they're actually then working together. So it can become very complex and convoluted, and the relationship element becomes an extra, I shouldn't say additional layer, but a key layer that needs to be focused on. So the performance of them needs to continue to grow, and therefore what we need within a lot of those teams are those people with those growth mindsets, so they can continue to learn. I don't mean just learn as in educate themselves by reading, but learn about why that other team that they need to interact with has challenges, and how they can help them, how they can actually be working more effectively by whether it's using technology or understanding how their relationships impact or distract or interfere with other teams or individuals. So it's a fascinating almost organism of teams and people and interrelationships and interconnectedness. And it's the complexity of a business and its external and internal relationships that need to continue to be understood and worked on and reflected on. So it's quite a complex area, but if there are a bunch of models that can be used, and in fact, the one that I use mostly for looking at how leadership teams are performing or where they can improve themselves is the six conditions of team effectiveness, which is a fantastic model that I use and bring to leadership teams to, firstly, for them to understand how or which areas are fundamental for them to focus on, which is ensuring that they're a real team. But I'll talk about this in another talk, much more around this model and how it can be used and how powerful it can be to not only benchmark the performance of an effective or high performing team, but also to identify the highest impact areas to focus on and to develop to improve that performance of the leadership team within the context of the business and the wider system. If you think of it from a systems thinking perspective, the wider system, how does that need to be developed? So a leadership team, there's some fantastic frameworks, and as I said, the one that I would use as a starting point is the six conditions of team effectiveness, and now we can use to understand the benchmark of performance of a leadership team, and the key areas to focus on to develop it, which becomes an ongoing journey. Which I will say, one of the key areas that teams often don't utilize is team coaching. Now, team coaching, just to wrap this quite quickly, is that there is a role, whether it's an internal role by the team leader itself or by an external individual, that there is active coaching on the performance of that team itself. So that is just bringing awareness to where improvements could occur or where there might be some gaps. So as long as that occurs, the team itself can continue to grow, which is the most important thing of all.